The sun has begun its long, slow descent toward the edge of the world, painting the water in shades of bruised plum and tarnished silver as the last of the day's warmth retreats from the air. There is a specific kind of stillness that settles over the coast at this hour, a moment when the transition from light to shadow feels less like a change in time, and more like a change in the weight of the atmosphere itself. The salt spray hangs suspended in the breeze, a fine mist that tastes of ancient things, and the only sound is the rhythmic, patient pulse of the Atlantic breathing against the granite teeth of the shore. Out here, where the land finally yields to the immense, unmapped territory of the deep, a small boat moves with a quiet purpose across the swells. It is a humble vessel, its wood weathered by seasons of brine and sun, carrying a man and his few belongings toward a pillar of white stone that stands solitary against the darkening sky. As the distance between the boat and the mainland grows, the sounds of the town, the distant ringing of a blacksmith's hammer, the lowing of cattle, the communal hum of voices dissolve into the vastness. They are replaced by the whistling of the wind through the rigging and the heavy, liquid sigh of the waves. This is the crossing, the invisible boundary where the life of the world ends and the life of the light begins. The man in the boat does not look back with regret, but rather with a quiet, settling acceptance, watching as the familiar green hills of the coast flatten into a thin, dark line on the horizon before vanishing entirely into the twilight. He is moving toward a solitude that few can fathom, a life measured not by the ticking of a clock in a parlor, but by the slow accumulation of tides and the steady, unwavering responsibility of the flame. The lighthouse rises from the rock like a natural extension of the earth, a tapering tower of mortar and stone that has already witnessed 1,000 storms and remained unmoved. It is a sturdy, silent sentinel, built with a thickness of wall that suggests a fortress against the infinite. As the boat pulls alongside the small, barnacle-encrusted landing, the man feels the transition in his very bones. The stone beneath his feet is solid, ancient, and indifferent to the turmoil of the water surrounding it. He stands for a moment, letting the spray dampen his coat, breathing in the purity of the air. There is no dust here, no smoke from a neighbor's chimney, only the scent of kelp and cold, deep water. The boatman leaves with a brief nod, a silent acknowledgement of the task ahead, and soon the splash of oars fades away, leaving the new keeper alone with the tower. He turns to the heavy iron door, its surface pitted by years of salt air, and feels the weight of the key in his palm. It is a large, grounding object, a physical manifestation of his new reality. When the door swings open, it does so with a slow, communal groan of metal, welcoming him into the cool, shadowed interior of the base. The air inside is still and carries the faint, honest scent of linseed oil, beeswax, and the metallic temps of brass. It is a clean smell, the smell of a place that demands care and precision. He begins the climb, his footsteps creating a soft, rhythmic echo against the spiral staircase of granite. Each step is a deliberate movement upward, a winding journey away from the surface of the earth. The walls are thick, and the light that filters through the small, deep-set windows is grey and ethereal, casting long, soft shadows that seem to dance in the periphery of his vision. As he ascends, the roar of the surf below changes its character. It loses its sharp, crashing edge and becomes a low, melodic drone, a foundational hum that vibrates through the very stone of the tower. It is a sound that he will eventually stop hearing with his ears and start feeling with his pulse, a constant companion that will define the boundaries of his days. Upon reaching the living quarters, he finds a circular room that feels like the heart of the tower. It is modest and purposeful, containing a narrow bed, a sturdy wooden table, and a small stove for warmth. There is a profound sense of peace in this minimalism. Here, there is no clutter of the mind or the home. Everything has a place, and every object serves a function. He sets his bag down on the floor, the sound muffled by the stone, and walks to the window. From this height, the ocean is no longer a series of waves, but a great, undulating fabric of charcoal and ink, stretching out until it meets the first faint pinpricks of the stars. The transition from the life of a landsman to the life of a keeper is not a sudden break, but a slow, internal settling, like silt falling to the bottom of a clear pond. He realizes, as he watches the last of the light drain from the sky, that his relationship with time is already beginning to shift. On the mainland, time is a series of interruptions, appointments, conversations, the needs of others. Here, time is a vast, open sea. It is something to be lived in rather than managed. He moves through the small room, his hands tracing the curve of the walls, familiarizing himself with the geography of his isolation. He feels the immense weight of the masonry around him, a comfort against the emptiness of the exterior world. The tower is not a cage, but a sanctuary, a place where the soul can expand to fill the silence. He thinks of the men who stood here before him, their hands polishing the same brass, their eyes watching the same horizon. He is part of a long, invisible chain of watchers, a lineage of men who traded the comforts of the society for the clarity of the edge. There is a dignity in this solitude, a quiet pride in being the one who remains awake while the world sleeps, the one who holds the light against the encroaching dark dot as the evening deepens into true night. He prepares for his first ascent to the lantern room. This is the sacred chamber at the top of the world, where the great glass lenses sit in their brass cradles, waiting to be brought to life. The air is cooler here, and the wind hums a different tune against the thick panes of glass. He moves with a slow, reverent grace, his movements practiced and unhurried. He checks the oil levels, his fingers moving over the smooth surfaces of the lamps with a gentle touch. There is a mechanical poetry to the apparatus, a symphony of gears and weights designed to turn the light in a slow, hypnotic circle. He does not light the wick yet. Instead, he stands on the gallery, looking out at the world he has inherited. The sea is a restless giant, moaning in its sleep, and the wind carries the stories of distant lands, of ships he will never see and people he will never know. He is the guardian of their safety, a silent ghost in a white tower, a point of constancy in a world of motion. He feels a sense of deep, anchoring calm. The isolation is not a void to be filled, but a presence to be honored. He knows that in the days and weeks to come, he will learn the language of the birds that nest in the cliffs, the subtle variations in the color of the water that signal a coming storm, and the way the moonlight tracks across the floor of his room during the long winter nights. He descends back to his living quarters for a moment, the stone steps feeling more familiar now, as if they are beginning to recognize his gait. He prepares a simple meal by the light of a single candle, the flame steady and tall in the draughtless room. The shadows on the walls are soft and rounded, following the curve of the tower. Every movement he makes is amplified by the silence, the scrape of a chair, the clink of a spoon, the soft rustle of his clothing. These small sounds are the landmarks of his new existence, the tiny anchors that keep him moored to the present moment. He finds himself breathing in time with the ocean, a slow, deep inhalation of the salt-tossed air, a long, peaceful exhalation into the shadows. The world beyond the walls feels like a dream he once had, a feverish, crowded dream that has finally broken, leaving him here in the cool, clear reality of the stone and the sea. He sits at his table for a long time, not out of weariness, but out of a desire to simply exist in this newfound stillness. There is no urgency to sleep, no pressure to achieve, only the requirement to be. The lighthouse is a clock that does not count seconds, but counts the endurance of light against the dark. And he is the keeper of that count. Outside, the stars have multiplied. A silver dust scattered across the velvet canopy of the night. The Milky Way arches over the tower, a luminous bridge that seems to connect the lighthouse to the very center of the galaxy. The man feels a sense of kinship with the celestial bodies. Like them, he has a fixed path, a steady burn, a role to play in the grand, unfolding geometry of the universe. He realizes that his isolation is a form of intimacy, a way of being closer to the fundamental elements of creation. Without the distractions of the shore, he can hear the heartbeat of the world. He can feel the tilt of the earth as it turns through the void. He stands up and walks once more to the window, pressing his forehead against the cool glass. The water below is a field of whitecaps, flickering like ghosts in the starlight. He knows that tomorrow he will begin the routine in earnest, the cleaning of the glass, the trimming of the wicks, the hauling of the oil, the recording of the weather in the heavy leather-bound logbook. It is a life of repetition, but it is a repetition that builds a soul. Each day will be a prayer of labor, each night a meditation of watchfulness. The fire in the small stove has settled into a bed of glowing embers, casting a warm amber light across the room. It is time, he thinks, to return to the top. The first night is the most important, the night when the tower and the man become one. The golden radiance of the lantern room spills down the upper reaches of the spiral stairs, casting long, sweeping shadows that dance against the curved masonry as the lens begins its slow, mechanical rotation. There is a profound sense of gravity in this first watch, a realization that the light is now an extension of his own will, a steady pulse of intent pushed out into the vast, indifferent dark. He moves through the circular gallery with a quiet, deliberate grace, his fingers trailing along the cool brass fittings, feeling the subtle vibration of the clockwork mechanism that drives the heavy glass assembly. It is a living thing, this machinery, requiring a constant, gentle dialogue of oil and adjustment, a partnership between the metal and the man. He finds a small, high stool positioned near the glass and takes his seat, settling into the long hours of the vigil. Outside the thick panes, the world has vanished into a seamless void of black, where the horizon has been erased and the only evidence of the ocean is the rhythmic, white fracture of the surf far below. The beam of light cuts a solid architectural path through the mist, a shimmering road of silver dust that illuminates the hidden textures of the air. He watches it sweep across the void, a silent metronome counting the passage of a night that feels as though it might last forever. The isolation is no longer a concept or a distance measured in miles. It has become a physical weight, a quiet pressure against his chest that is both humbling and strangely liberating. There is no one to speak to, no one to answer to, only the demand of the flame and the requirement of his own presence. He finds that his thoughts, usually so cluttered with the trivialities of the mainland, begin to stretch and thin, becoming as translucent as the sea spray. He remembers the sound of the wind in the trees back home, a sharp, rustling noise. But here the wind has a deeper, more resonant voice. a low thrumming that sounds like the vibration of a great harp string stretched across the bay. He begins to notice the subtle differences in the dark. The way the shadows in the corners of the lantern room seem to breathe with the movement of the light, and the way the glass reflects his own image back at him, a solitary figure silhouetted against the brilliance. A ghost in the machine of the night. As the hours deepen, he descends the stairs to the living quarters to tend to the small stove, his footsteps falling with a soft, muffled precision on the stone. The transition from the brilliant, spinning world of the lantern to the dim, static warmth of the room below is like stepping from one dream into another. The air here is thick with the scent of burning driftwood and the lingering aroma of the tea he brewed earlier. He moves through the space with an increasing familiarity, his body learning the dimensions of the tower, the way he must duck his head slightly at the landing, and the specific resistance of the cupboard door. He feels like a hermit in a stone cell, but a cell that looks out upon the infinite. He sits at the small wooden table, the surface of which is scarred by the knives of previous keepers, each mark a silent testament to a life lived in increments of solitude. He runs his hand over the grain of the wood, wondering about the men who sat here 50 years before, watching the same moon rise over the same restless water. Did they feel this same sense of suspension, as if the tower were a vessel sailing through time rather than space? The silence of the room is not empty. It is filled with the low, subterranean moan of the swell hitting the foundation, a sound that seems to originate from the very center of the earth. It is a grounding frequency, a reminder that while he is elevated above the waves, he is inextricably tied to the rock. He finds a strange comfort in the repetition of his movements, the way he folds his coat, the way he sets his cup down, the way he adjusts the wick of his small hand lamp. These are the rituals of a life stripped of its vanity, a life where the smallest action takes on the weight of a ceremony. He realizes that in the world he left behind, he was always moving toward something, always anticipating the next hour, the next day, the next encounter. Here there is no toward. There is only the present, a vast and shimmering expanse of now, as wide and deep as the Atlantic itself. He returns to the top of the tower, the climb feeling more effortless this time, as if the stone is helping him upward. The lantern room is a sanctuary of light in a universe of shadow. He checks the oil reservoirs, ensuring the flow remains constant, his movements becoming part of the machine's own rhythm. He watches a distant bank of clouds drift across the stars, their edges silvered by the moonlight, looking like mountains of wool moving across a dark plain. The sea below has become a field of shifting obsidian, the white caps appearing like sudden, brief blossoms of snow on a black field. He thinks of the ships that might be out there, miles beyond the reach of his vision, and the men on those ships looking toward this very point on the horizon. He is the invisible thread that connects them to the land, a silent guardian whose only language is the steady rotation of the beam. It is a heavy responsibility, but it does not feel burdensome. It feels like a purpose that fits him as perfectly as a well-worn glove. He begins to understand that the lighthouse is not just a building, but a philosophy, a commitment to being a constant in a world of variables. The night air, even filtered through the glass, is cold and sharp, keeping his senses keen. He notices the way the brass fittings have begun to dim slightly under a layer of salt-induced tarnish, and he anticipates the quiet satisfaction he will feel in the morning when he polishes them back to a mirror shine. Everything in this life requires maintenance, a continuous act of care that prevents the wildness of the sea from reclaiming the works of man. He leans back against the interior wall, his eyes tracking the sweep of the light. Each rotation takes exactly the same amount of time, a heartbeat of the tower. He finds himself timing his breathing to the cycle, inhaling as the light sweeps past his field of vision, exhaling as it disappears into the dark. This synchronization brings a deep, meditative calm, a sense of being woven into the fabric of the night. The boundary between the keeper and the lighthouse begins to blur. He is the consciousness of the tower, the spirit that gives the stone its voice of fire. He thinks about the transition he has made, the shedding of his former identity like a winter coat no longer needed. The names of people he knew, the details of his old life, feel distant and pale, like sketches in a book left out in the rain. What matters now is the temperature of the oil, the tension of the weights, and the direction of the wind. He is being remade by the elements, shaped by the salt and the silence into something more durable, something more aligned with the granite beneath his feet. The night is a vast cathedral, and he is its solitary monk, offering up his wakefulness as a form of devotion. He feels no urge to rush the coming of the dawn. The darkness is a rich, textured thing, full of subtle gradients and hidden movements. He hears the cry of a lone seabird, a haunting, fluting sound that rises above the roar of the surf and then is swallowed by the wind. It is a lonely sound, but it is not a sad one. It is simply the sound of a creature finding its way in the world. Much like he is doing now, the middle of the night brings a shift in the atmosphere, a deepening of the chill and a change in the song of the sea. The tide is turning, and the water begins to retreat from the base of the rock with a long, dragging sound, like the raking of gravel. He watches the change in the waves, the way they become more peaked and restless as the currents collide. He is learning the topography of the water, the hidden shoals and ridges that reveal themselves only through the patterns of the foam. This knowledge is not something that can be taught. It must be absorbed through hours of observation, through the slow accumulation of visual data. He feels a sense of profound privilege in being the sole witness to this transformation. The world is different at 3 a.m. It is more raw, more honest, stripped of the pretensions of the day. He finds himself thinking about the nature of light itself, how it is both a physical presence and a symbol of hope. To him, it is a technical reality, matter of wicks and mirrors, but to the world outside, it is a beacon of safety. He holds both truths in his hands, the practical and the poetic, and finds that they do not conflict. They are the twin pillars of his new existence. As the night begins its slow lean toward the morning, he feels a gentle fatigue settle over him, not a weary exhaustion, but a soft, enveloping heaviness like a wool blanket. He remains in his chair, his gaze fixed on the horizon, waiting for the first, infinitesimal change in the quality of the blackness. The stars are at their most brilliant now, the constellations wheeling overhead in a slow, majestic dance that has been performed for eons. He feels small in the face of such vastness, but it is a comfortable smallness. He is a part of the grand design, a necessary cog in the great machinery of the world. The tower feels more like a home now than it did when he arrived. Its circular walls are a protective embrace, its height a vantage point from which to contemplate the mysteries of the deep. He thinks about the days ahead, the long stretches of sunlight when he will sleep and work and watch the sea change from blue to green to grey. The first thin line of dawn begins as a pale wash of lavender along the eastern rim, slowly bleeding into a soft, translucent gold that reveals the true scale of the surrounding waters. From the height of the gallery, the keeper watches the transition with a steady, unblinking gaze, seeing the charcoal waves of the night transform into a textured landscape of deep slate and bruising indigo. The transition is quiet, devoid of any sudden fanfare, a gradual unfolding of the world that feels like the slow opening of a heavy door. As the sun finally clears the horizon, a molten path of light stretches across the surface of the Atlantic, turning the foam on the rocks below into brilliant, shimmering salt. It is time for the transition of responsibility, the moment when the celestial light takes over for the man-made flame. He reaches for the mechanism with hands that have grown accustomed to the cool, unyielding nature of the brass, and with a practiced, gentle movement, he brings the great lamp to rest. The sudden absence of the intense golden glow leaves the room feeling vast and quiet in the grey morning light, and for a moment he simply stands there, letting his eyes adjust to the soft reality of the day. The task of the night is finished, yet the life of the tower is a continuous circle, and as the heat begins to fade from the glass lenses, the work of the day presents itself with a quiet, persistent gravity. He begins his descent, the stone stairs now familiar enough that he no longer needs to watch his footing, his hand sliding along the curved wall as he moves downward into the cooler, dimmer heart of the tower. In the living quarters, the air is still and holds the faint, lingering warmth of the previous evening's fire. He moves to the small stove, clearing away the grey ash with a slow, meditative precision that mirrors the movement of the tides outside. There is no hurry to his actions. Each movement is an end in itself, a small ceremony of survival and order. He prepares a simple meal of porridge and hard bread, the steam from the pot rising in a thin, vertical column in the draughtless room. Eating in the silence, he finds that the flavors are more pronounced, the texture of the grain and the saltiness of the butter becoming subjects of deep, quiet contemplation. This is the beginning of the slow sharpening of the senses that comes with isolation. A process where the world narrows in scope but expands in depth when the meal is finished. He gathers his cleaning supplies, the soft chamois cloths, the tins of fine rouge for polishing, and the brushes for clearing away the soot of the night. The climb back to the lantern room is now an expected part of his physical rhythm, a vertical journey that marks the start of his labor. The morning sun has begun to warm the glass panes, and the air inside the lantern room is bright and clear. He begins with the lenses, the massive, intricate prisms of glass that are the soul of the lighthouse. He wipes away the faint film of oil and smoke with long, sweeping strokes, watching as the glass regains its crystalline purity. It is a slow, meticulous process that requires him to move around the entire circumference of the light, his body following the same circular path the beam takes at night. There is a profound, wordless satisfaction in this work. To see the clarity return to the glass is to feel a sense of order being restored to the world. He polishes the brass pedestals until they reflect the blue of the sky and the white of the clouds, turning the interior of the room into a kaleidoscope of light and metal. His thoughts are as clear as the glass he cleans, free from the entanglements of the mainland and the anxieties of the future. He thinks only of the tension in the cloth, the resistance of the metal, and the way the dust motes dance in the shafts of sunlight. This is the meditative core of the keeper's life, the understanding that the end of safety of the horizon depends on the cleanliness of a single wick and the brilliance of a polished surface. The repetition of the task does not feel like a burden, but like a grounding ritual, a way of anchoring himself to the reality of his purpose. By the time the glass is polished and the brass is gleaming, the sun has climbed high into the sky, and the ocean has turned a brilliant, sparkling turquoise that makes the eyes ache with its intensity. He steps out onto the exterior gallery, the wind catching his hair and the salt spray dampening his skin. From this height, he can see the shadows of the clouds racing across the water, looking like dark, phantom ships moving toward the unknown. He observes the seabirds, the gulls and gannets that wheel and dive with effortless grace, their cries lost in the steady roar of the wind. They are his neighbors now, the only other inhabitants of this vertical world, and he feels a quiet kinship with their solitary, focused existence, descending once more to the base of the tower. He turns his attention to the heavy work of the day. There are barrels of oil to be inspected and moved, the lifeblood of the light that must be guarded with jealous care. He moves with a slow, deliberate strength, his muscles responding to the demands of the stone and the steel. He checks the stores of coal and wood, the barrels of salted meat and hardtack, calculating the days and weeks ahead with a calm, analytical mind. There is no fear of the coming winter or the isolation. There is only the preparation, the quiet gathering of resources against the eventual closing of the world. He finds a small patch of sheltered ground at the foot of the tower where a few hardy weeds have managed to take root in the crevices of the granite. He spends a long time looking at them, marveling at their persistence in the face of the salt and the gale. He realizes that he, too, is taking root in this hard place, his life narrowing down to the essentials of light and stone and the endurance of the spirit. The afternoon passes in a series of small, necessary tasks. He mends a torn hem in his coat, the needle moving through the heavy fabric with a rhythmic precision. He spends an hour in the small library of the tower, running his fingers over the spines of the few books left by his predecessors. They are books of navigation, of mathematics, and a few well-worn volumes of poetry and history. He reads a few pages, the words sounding in his mind like echoes from a distant country. But he finds that the reality of the wind and the sea is more compelling than the printed page. His life has become a story that is being written in real time, a narrative of silence and steady work. As the sun begins its gradual descent toward the west, the shadows of the tower lengthen across the rock, pointing like a giant sundial toward the mainland he can no longer see. The air begins to cool, and the golden quality of the afternoon light returns, signaling the approach of the evening watch. He feels a growing sense of familiarity with the space, a feeling that the lighthouse is no longer a stranger to him, but a companion. He knows the exact sound the wind makes as it passes over the vent holes, the way the light hits the table at 4 o'clock, and the specific chill of the stone floor in the corners of the room. This familiarity is the first stage of belonging, the point where the environment stops being an external force and begins to be an internal state of being. He prepares his evening meal with the same unhurried care as his breakfast, the routine providing a structure that prevents the vastness of the sea from becoming overwhelming. He realizes that the solitude is not a vacuum, but a presence, a quiet friend that walks beside him through the circular rooms. He does not miss the sound of human voices. The conversation of the ocean is enough. The tide is coming in now, the waves striking the base of the rock with a heavier, more resonant force that vibrates through the entire structure of the lighthouse. It is a deep, comforting sound, the heartbeat of the world making itself known. He begins to prepare the lamp for the night, the ritual of the morning now reversed. He trims the wicks with a steady hand, ensuring they are perfectly level so the flame will be even and bright. He checks the oil levels and the weights of the clockwork mechanism, his movements fluid and instinctive. The light is failing outside, the sky turning a bruised, magnificent purple that reflects in the darkened water. He stands in the lantern room once more, the glass cool against his palm as he watches the horizon dissolve. The transition back to the night feels natural and right, a return to the primary duty of his life. He is no longer the man who arrived on the boat with a heavy key and an uncertain heart. He is the keeper, the one who remains when the sun departs. He feels the weight of the coming hours, the long, silent vigil that will stretch until the dawn, and he welcomes it. The repetition of the day has cleared his mind, leaving him ready for the focus of the night. He looks out at the first few stars as they begin to appear in the darkening vault of the sky, feeling a sense of deep, anchoring peace. The tower is solid beneath him, the rock is firm beneath the tower, and the sea is a constant, breathing presence that defines the limits of his world. He is a part of the rhythm now, a component of the great cycle of light and dark, tide and time. He reaches for the striker, his movements slow and reverent, prepared to bring the flame back to life. The first night was a discovery. The first day was a lesson, and now, as the second night approaches, he feels the beginning of a long, steady habit of being. The light will turn, the sea will moan, and he will be there, a quiet sentinel in the vast, unfolding mystery of the world. The golden bloom of the lamp once more fills the lantern room, pushing back the encroaching indigo of the twilight and marking the true beginning of the second night. As the light begins its slow, rhythmic sweep, the keeper settles into the familiarity of the watch, but he notices that the atmosphere has begun a subtle shift, a departure from the crystalline stillness of his first hours on the rock. The wind, which had been a mere whisper against the glass, now carries a different weight, a low and steady vibration that seems to originate from somewhere deep in the north. He watches the horizon, where the stars are being slowly extinguished not by the dawn, but by a creeping curtain of cloud that advances like a silent army across the celestial vault. The air around the gallery grows thick and heavy with the scent of distant rain, a metallic and damp aroma that speaks of the vast, churning reaches of the open sea. He finds that he is no longer checking his pocket watch to mark the hours. Instead, he is learning to read the time in the changing texture of the dark and the increasing pressure of the air against the tower's stone skin. Time here is not a series of mechanical ticks, but a fluid and elemental progression, measured by the rising humidity on the brass fittings and the way the shadows deepen in the hollows of the waves. He feels the lighthouse respond to the changing weather as if it were a sentient being, a great stone giant leaning into the wind with a quiet and resolute strength. The vibration of the lantern's clockwork blends with the low thrum of the gusting air, creating a symphony of endurance that resonates through the soles of his feet. He realizes that the tower is not merely a shelter, but a living companion, one that breathes with the gale and stands fast against the tide. And in this realization, his sense of isolation begins to transform into a deep, meditative partnership. The days that follow bleed into one another, not as a blurred confusion, but as a series of slow, overlapping waves of experience. He wakes each morning not to the sound of a bell, but to the specific quality of the light as it enters his circular chamber. There are mornings when the sun is a fierce, white eye that makes the salt crust on the windows glitter like diamonds. And there are mornings when the world is wrapped in a thick, grey wool of fog so dense that the gallery seems to float in a void, disconnected from both sea and sky. In the fog, the passage of time becomes even more abstract. The hours stretch and compress as he moves through his tasks, the silence of the mist amplifying the sound of his own breathing and the distant, muffled groan of the swell. He spends these grey hours in a state of quiet industry, his hands moving over the brass and glass with an instinctive grace that requires no conscious thought. The routine has become a part of his physical makeup, a series of movements as natural as the beating of his heart. He finds that he can sense the arrival of midday. By the way the shadows retreat into the base of the tower and the way the seabirds settle onto the lower ledges of the rock to wait out the tide, there is a profound peace in this alignment with the natural world, a shedding of the artificial urgency that defines the life of the mainland. He no longer feels the need to fill the silence with internal monologue. Instead, he listens to the dialogue of the elements, the way the wind whistles through the iron railings, and the way the water gurgles in the deep fissures of the granite. The clouds become his primary interest, a vast and ever-changing gallery of form and light. He learns to distinguish the high, wispy cirrus that heralds a change in the upper atmosphere from the heavy, dark-bellied nimbus that carries the weight of a storm. He watches them move across the sky in great, silent processions, their shadows painting temporary islands on the surface of the water. He begins to understand the personality of the wind, the way a southerly breeze brings a soft, humid warmth that makes the stone walls sweat, while a northwesterly wind brings a sharp, biting clarity that turns the ocean into a field of brilliant, jagged sapphire. He notices how the lighthouse seems to change color with the weather, appearing brilliant and stark against a blue sky, but turning a somber, bruised gray when the clouds hang low and heavy. The tower is a barometer of his existence, reflecting the state of the world back to him in its reflections and its resonances. He finds himself talking softly to the stone, sometimes not out of a loss of reason, but as a gesture of respect to the entity that keeps him safe. He touches the walls with the palm of his hand, feeling the coolness of the masonry and the immense solidity of the construction, and he feels a sense of gratitude that is as deep as the foundation of the rock itself. Mealtimes are governed by the appetite of the body and the demands of the light, rather than by the arbitrary numbers on a dial. He eats when the sun reaches a certain point on the horizon, or when the cooling of the lantern room signals that the day's cleaning is done. His diet is simple and unchanging, but he finds a deep satisfaction in the preparation of his food, the way the flame licks the bottom of the kettle, the way the steam carries the scent of simple grains. The act of eating is a quiet celebration of his own persistence, a replenishment of the energy he gives to the tower. He spends his afternoons in a state of watchful repose, sometimes sitting on the lower gallery to watch the tide come in. He observes the way the water slowly swallows the lower rocks, the foam swirling in complex, lace-like patterns that are never repeated. He sees the kelp forests swaying beneath the surface, a hidden world of green and gold that exists in a different dimension of time. He realizes that his life is now measured by these cycles, the coming and going of the water, the waxing and waning of the moon, the slow migration of the stars across the sky. He is no longer an observer of nature. He is a participant in it, a small but essential element in the ecology of the coast. As the first week draws toward its end, a period of unsettled weather brings a new rhythm to his days. The wind begins to hunt around the tower, changing direction with a restless energy that keeps him alert. The sky is a chaotic canvas of scudding grey clouds and sudden brilliant shafts of sunlight that illuminate the spray of the waves. He watches the sea rise and fall with a new intensity, the swells becoming larger and more powerful, their crests beginning to break into white horses that gallop across the surface of the bay. The sound of the ocean changes from a rhythmic sigh to a deep, resonant booming that shakes the very bones of the lighthouse. He feels the vibration in his teeth as he climbs the stairs, a reminder of the raw power that surrounds his small sanctuary. Yet, There is no fear in him. He trusts the stone. He trusts the men who laid the mortar and the engineers who calculated the curve of the walls. He feels a quiet pride in being the one who stands at the center of this turmoil, the one whose steady hand keeps the light turning even as the world outside becomes a vortex of salt and wind. He spends extra time in the lantern room, checking the tension of the cables and the alignment of the lenses, his movements precise and calm. The lighthouse seems to settle deeper into the rock, its weight a defiance against the lift of the gale. During these hours of increasing wind, he notices the behavior of the seabirds. They huddle together in the lee of the cliffs, their heads tucked beneath their wings, waiting for the energy of the sky to spend itself. He feels a sense of shared stoicism with them, a mutual understanding of the need to endure. He spends his time indoors when the spray becomes too heavy, the interior of the tower feeling more like a cocoon than ever before. The thick walls dampen the roar of the storm, turning it into a low, comforting hum that lulls him into a state of deep reflection. He thinks about the concept of home, how it is transformed from a place of many rooms and many people into this single, vertical column of stone. He realizes that home is not where one is comfortable, but where one is needed. He is needed here, and that knowledge provides a sense of belonging that he never fully achieved on the mainland. The simplicity of his purpose has cleared away the many layers of doubt and distraction that used to cloud his mind. He is the keeper of the light, and in that definition, he finds a total and absolute clarity. The passage of time is also marked by the depletion of his supplies, a slow and measurable decrease that he records with a calm hand in his logbook. He sees the oil level in the large storage tanks drop by a fraction each day, a physical manifestation of the light he has given to the sea. He counts the sacks of coal and the barrels of water, not with anxiety, but with a sense of stewardship. Every resource is precious, and every use of those resources is a deliberate choice. He finds that he is becoming more economical in his movements and his needs, mirroring the efficiency of the lighthouse itself. He wastes nothing, not a drop of oil, not a scrap of food, and not a moment of his own attention. He is becoming as lean and purposeful as the tower, his life stripped of everything that does not contribute to the maintenance of the flame. This austerity is not a hardship. It is a refinement, a paring away of the unnecessary until only the essential remains. In the late afternoons, when the clouds break for a moment to reveal a bruised and dramatic sunset, he stands on the gallery and watches the light play across the turbulent water. The colors are intense and fleeting slashes of orange and violet that look like wounds in the gray sky. The golden rotation of the light continues to mark the divisions of the night with a mathematical certainty that has become the bedrock of his consciousness. A steady and reassuring heartbeat that pulses against the vast, indifferent dark of the mid. As the days stretch into the second and third weeks of his tenure, the linear progression of time once measured by the specific events of a social world begins to soften and dissolve into a more circular and elemental experience. He finds that the names of the days have lost their meaning. It is no longer Tuesday or Friday, but rather the day of the low, clinging fog, or the day when the wind shifted to the east and brought the scent of distant ice. This blurring of time is not a source of confusion, but a profound and settling comfort, as if he has finally stepped out of a frantic stream and onto a solid, unchanging bank. The isolation has ceased to be a new condition to be managed, and has instead become the very air he breathes, a quiet and expansive medium in which his thoughts can wander without the interruption of external voices or the friction of competing wills. He notices that fewer ships appear on the horizon now. The the seasonal lanes perhaps shifting further south, and the absence of these distant, flickering lights only serves to deepen his intimacy with the immediate surroundings of the rock. The world beyond the reach of his beam has become a secondary reality, a flickering memory of a life that belonged to a different man, while the reality of the stone, the oil, and the rhythmic sigh of the Atlantic has become absolute and singular. His thought patterns begin to undergo a subtle and gentle transformation, shedding the rapid-fire anxieties of the shore in favor of a slower, more observational mode of being. On the mainland, the mind is often a crowded marketplace of unfinished conversations and prospective worries. But here, the silence acts as a natural filter, allowing the trivial to fall away until only the essential remains. He finds himself contemplating a single object for an hour at a time, the way the light refracts through a drop of condensation on the lantern glass, or the intricate, lace-like patterns of salt that form in the crevices of the exterior gallery. These observations are not born of boredom, but of a newfound capacity for attention that the silence has granted him. He realizes that when the world is stripped of its noise, the smallest details begin to speak with a surprising and eloquent clarity. He watches the way a single feather from a passing gull caught in a niche of the masonry trembles in the wind, and in its movement he sees the entire complexity of the aerodynamic forces at play around the tower. His mind has become, like the lighthouse itself, a sturdy, focused instrument designed to cast a long light over a wide area, moving with a deliberate and unhurried grace. This internal stillness brings with it a sense of profound emotional equilibrium. The sharp peaks and valleys of mood that once defined his days have leveled out into a steady, calm plateau of existence. The silence of the tower has become a familiar and welcome companion, a texture of sound that he has learned to read with the same precision as his nautical charts. It is never truly an empty silence, but rather a rich and layered tapestry of the tower's own voice. There is the low, subterranean thrum of the ocean striking the foundation, a sound so constant that it has become the baseline of his hearing. There is the silver whistling song of the wind as it passes through the iron railings of the gallery, changing its pitch with every slight shift in velocity. There is the rhythmic, mechanical sigh of the clockwork weights descending through the center of the spiral staircase, a slow and patient count of the passing hours. He moves through these sounds with a quiet reverence, his own footsteps providing a soft, percussive counterpoint to the music of the stone. He finds that he no longer feels the need to speak aloud to break the quiet. The dialogue he is having with the elements is wordless and complete. Even the act of writing in the logbook has become a more sparse and poetic exercise, the entries shifting from detailed accounts of his daily labor to brief, evocative descriptions of the light and the sea. He records the height of the swells and the direction of the clouds with a hand that has become sure and steady. The ink on the page a silent testament to a life that is being lived with total and absolute intent. As the days blend together, the lighthouse begins to reveal its more subtle secrets to him, the way a person might reveal their character over years of friendship. He learns which steps of the spiral staircase have a slight, almost imperceptible hollow to them, and how the temperature of the air in the base of the tower can predict a change in the weather. 12 hours before the barometer moves, he notices the way the moonlight tracks across the floor of his sleeping chamber, a cold and silver finger that points toward the center of the room at the exact moment of the tide's turn. The tower is no longer an inanimate object of stone and mortar. It is a living extension of his own body, a protective shell that breathes and vibrates in sympathy with his own pulse. He feels a sense of immense safety within its walls, a feeling that no matter how the sea may churn or the wind may howl, the integrity of the light in the man will remain unbroken. This bond with the structure provides a deep sense of rootedness that he never found in the shifting sands of the social world. He belongs to the rock, and the rock belongs to him. And in that mutual belonging, the very concept of loneliness becomes obsolete. He spends long afternoons sitting on the lee side of the gallery, his back against the warm, whitewashed stone, watching the play of light on the water. The ocean has 1,000 different faces, and he is learning to recognize them all. There is the leaden, oily calm of a humid afternoon when the water seems to have the consistency of mercury. There is the bright, dancing sapphire of a clear morning when every wave is tipped with a crown of sparkling foam. And there are the bruised charcoal hours of the evening when the sea looks like a vast field of ploughed earth. He observes the migration of the whales far out at sea, their distant spouts appearing like momentary puffs of smoke against the horizon, and he feels a quiet joy in their presence. They are fellow travelers in the deep, moving through their own cycles of time and distance, and he acknowledges them with a silent nod of his head. The world is so much larger than he had ever imagined, and his place in it, while small, feels infinitely more significant now that it is defined by service rather than by acquisition. He is the guardian of this particular coordinate on the map, the one whose presence ensures that the wildness of the sea remains tempered by the civilizing influence of the flame. His physical needs have become as streamlined as his thoughts. He moves with an economy of motion that preserves his energy for the long watches of the night. His hands, once softened by the life of the town, have grown calloused and strong, the skin toughened by the salt and the constant handling of brass and iron. He finds a simple pleasure in the manual labor of the dather, hauling of the oil, the scrubbing of the stone floors, the meticulous polishing of the reflectors. These tasks are a form of physical prayer, a way of honoring the tower and the life it sustains. He no longer views them as chores to be finished so that he can move on to something else. They are the substance of his life, and he performs them with a meditative focus that turns the ordinary into the sacred. He has discovered that there is a profound dignity in doing a simple thing perfectly, and he carries this realization with him as he moves through the circular rooms of his world. The meals he prepares are basic salted fish, dry biscuits, the occasional stew made from his dwindling stores of vegetables, but he eats them with a gratitude that makes them taste like a banquet. The water he drinks, hauled up from the cistern and filtered through charcoal, tastes of the earth and the rain, a pure, embracing liquid that clears his palate and his mind. As the evening of the 20th day approaches, he finds himself standing on the gallery, watching the sun dip below the horizon with a sense of complete and utter settlement. The transition from day to night no longer feels like an event, but like a natural respiration of the world. He watches the colors of the sky fade from a brilliant, bruised orange to a deep, transparent violet, and he feels the familiar cool of the evening air settle over his skin like a well-worn coat. He is no longer waiting for anything, not for the arrival of a supply boat, not for the end of his shift, not for a change in his circumstances. He has arrived at the center of his own life. The silence that surrounds the rock is not a void to be feared, but a sanctuary to be inhabited. He thinks of the millions of people on the mainland, caught in the gears of their busy lives, and he feels a gentle, non-judgmental pity for them. They are missing the clarity of the edge. They are missing the way the stars look when there is no other light to compete with them. He turns his gaze back toward the lantern, the glass already reflecting the last of the twilight, and he feels a surge of quiet, powerful affection for the machinery of the light. He begins the final preparations for the night watch. His movements fluid and certain in the darkening room. He doesn't need to think about where the matches are or how much to trim the wick. His body knows these things with a wisdom that transcends the mind. He is the keeper in the fullest sense of the word. He keeps the light, he keeps the watch, and he keeps the peace of the tower. The light of the lantern continues its steady, mathematical sweep across the darkening water, but the quality of the air that enters through the small, high vents has begun to change, carrying a sharp, crystalline edge that was not there during the long, humid weeks of late summer. The days have begun to contract, drawing their golden borders inward with a quiet and persistent haste, leaving the keeper to light the lamp a few minutes earlier with each passing rotation of the earth. This shortening of the day is not an abrupt departure, but a graceful, unfolding transition, as if the world is slowly exhaling and settling into a deeper, more contemplative state. He watches the sun's path across the sky become lower and more shallow, its midday height failing to reach the zenith it once claimed, and he notices how the shadows of the tower have grown longer and more lean, stretching across the granite and the foam like the reaching fingers of a silent giant. The sea, too, has shifted its palette. The brilliant dancing sapphires and vibrant turquoises of the warmer months have deepened into a somber, heavy slate, a color that suggests the profound cold dwelling in the depths beneath the swells. The movement of the water is different now as well. There is a new, restless energy in the waves, a weightier thump against the base of the rock that speaks of distant northern gales beginning to stir. He observes these changes with a calm and welcoming spirit, realizing that he is no longer a visitor to this environment, but a seasonal inhabitant whose internal rhythm has become perfectly attuned to the shifting geometry of the year, as the cooler air begins to dominate the nights. The interior of the tower takes on a more intimate and protective character, the thick stone walls holding the small heat of the stove with a stubborn and generous tenacity. He finds himself spending more time in the quiet middle of the day tending to the structural details of his home, checking the seals around the lantern glass and ensuring that the heavy iron shutters move freely on their hinges. Time has ceased to be a linear progression of events and has instead become a series of textures and temperatures. He reflects on how his perception of a month or a week has been replaced by the slow ripening of the season, a process that feels as natural and inevitable as the tide itself. The silence that once felt like a new garment has now become his own skin, comfortable and essential, and he finds that his thoughts have grown even more spacious and still. He contemplates the vast, invisible migrations occurring beneath the surface of the sea, imagining the great movements of life responding to the cooling water, and he feels a quiet satisfaction in his own fixedness. While the world around him prepares for the transition into winter, he remains the constant point of reference, the steady axis around which the changing year revolves. He notices the absence of the summer birds, their places taken by hardier, more stoic species that huddle against the wind, with a quiet endurance that mirrors his own. The transition is marked by a particular clarity in the atmosphere, a sharpening of the horizon that allows him to see further into the distance than ever before. On the clearest afternoons, the line between the sky and the sea is as sharp as a blade, and the stars at night seem to have multiplied, their light more piercing and brilliant in the cold, thin air. He spends long periods on the gallery, wrapped in his heavy wool coat, watching the way the moonlight reflects off the whitecaps, which now appear more frequently as the wind begins to hunt across the bay with a more consistent purpose. There is a profound sense of scale in these moments, a feeling of being a small but vital witness to the grand machinery of the planetary shift. He thinks of the mainland, where the harvest would be gathered and the hearths would be stoked for the coming chill. And he finds that he does not miss the communal preparations of the town. His harvest is the oil in the tanks and the clarity of the lenses. His hearth is the steady, blue flame glow of the lamp. He is prepared for the shortening days because his purpose does not depend on the sun. In fact, as the darkness grows longer, his role becomes more central, his light more necessary, and he feels a quiet, growing strength in the realization that he is most himself when the world is at its darkest. The repetition of his tasks has become a form of meditation that requires no conscious effort, leaving his mind free to explore the deep, quiet reaches of his memory and his imagination. He remembers the warmth of a summer garden or the sound of a crowded street as if they were scenes from a play he'd watched long ago, beautiful and distant, but no longer part of his immediate reality. His reality is the resistance of the brass polish against the cloth, the smell of the sea salt drying on the stone, and the rhythmic, metallic sigh of the clockwork weights. He finds that his memory has become more selective, discarding the clutter of old grievances or trivial anxieties, and retaining only the moments of pure, sensory clarity. He is becoming like the granite beneath him, weathered, solid, and stripped of everything that is not fundamental to his existence. The passage of time feels like the slow polishing of a stone, a process that gradually reveals the true grain and character of his soul. He is content in this stripping away, finding a strange and beautiful luxury in the simplicity of his needs. One afternoon, as a bank of low, purple clouds moves in from the north, he watches the first true frost of the season begin to bloom on the ironwork of the gallery. It is a delicate, crystalline growth that transforms the dark metal into something ethereal and white. He touches the railing with a bare hand, feeling the sharp, clean sting of the cold, and he smiles at the sensation. It is a sign that the world is turning, that the cycle is complete, and that he has endured through the full arc of the season. The sea below is a churning field of obsidian, the spray from the waves freezing as it hits the lower rocks, creating a glaze of ice that glitters in the failing light. The sound of the ocean has become a deeper, more resonant roar, a powerful and ancient voice that seems to vibrate through the very heart of the tower. He feels the lighthouse brace itself against the rising wind, a subtle shift in the tension of the building that he can feel in his own muscles. They are a single entity now, the man and the tower, standing together against the encroaching winter with a quiet and unbreakable, resolved as the sun disappears behind the wall of cloud, leaving the world in a deep, atmospheric twilight. He makes his way up the spiral stairs for the evening watch. Each step is a familiar friend, the stone worn smooth by the passage of his boots and the boots of those who came before him. He enters the lantern room, where the air is cool and still, waiting for the warmth of the lamp. He moves through the preparations with a slow, reverent grace, his hands moving with the certainty of a musician playing a well-loved piece. The light takes hold with a soft, confident flare, and as the great lens begins its rotation, the beam cuts through the grey mist with a renewed and fierce intensity. It is a brilliant, golden arm reaching out to touch the cold, dark skin of the Atlantic, a gesture of defiance and protection. He settles into his seat, the rhythmic sweep of the light casting a hypnotic pattern across the circular room, and he watches the first snow of the season begin to fall tiny, silent flakes that disappear as they touch the glass. The lighthouse stands firm, its white walls a stark and beautiful contrast to the darkening sky. a pillar of constancy in a world of transition. The keeper leans back, listening to the wind and the waves, knowing that while the seasons may change and the days may shorten, the light will remain, and he will be there to tend it, a quiet and settled soul at the center of the turning world. The silence of the night is filled with the soft hiss of the snow against the lantern glass, a sound so delicate it is more of a feeling than a noise. He finds himself watching the way the snowflakes are momentarily illuminated by the beam, appearing like millions of falling stars before vanishing into the dark. This new element in his environment brings a sense of profound stillness, a muffling of the world that makes the tower feel even more like a sanctuary. He thinks of the time that has passed since his arrival, the weeks and months that have melted into this single, continuous present. He is no longer counting the days. He is simply living the rhythm. He realizes that his initial apprehension about the isolation has been entirely replaced by a sense of deep, abiding peace. The lighthouse has taught him that solitude is not the absence of others, but the presence of oneself, fully realized and unencumbered. He is comfortable in his own company, finding that his internal life is as rich and varied as the sea itself. The changing season is not something to be feared or endured, but a new chapter in the ongoing dialogue between the keeper and the coast. He moves to the window and presses his forehead against the cool glass, looking out at the white-capped waves. The ocean is a vast, restless giant, but it no longer feels alien or threatening. He has learned its moods, its cycles, and its secrets. He knows that the winter will bring harder gales and longer nights, but he also knows that the tower is built for such things, and so is he. There is a quiet pride in this resilience, a sense of having found a purpose that is equal to the scale of the landscape. The transition into the heart of the colder months brings with it a deepening of the stillness, a quiet so profound that the mere thought of a human voice seems like a distant and echoing memory from another life. The sea has taken on a heavy, iron-like consistency, and the air is so sharp it feels as though it might shatter if struck. Yet within this frozen geometry, the keeper finds a warmth of spirit that he never possessed in the crowded streets of his past. The arrival of the supply boat, the first since the season turned, appears on the horizon not as a disruption, but as a slow and deliberate movement across the slate-grey water. He watches from the high gallery as the small, sturdy sloop navigates the treacherous currents that pull at the base of the rock, its sails appearing remarkably white against the brooding sky. As the vessel draws nearer, he begins the descent to the landing, his movements slow and methodical, his body adjusting to the prospect of another presence after so many weeks of internal dialogue and elemental song. The clatter of the boat coming alongside the barnacle-crusted granite is a startlingly complex sound, a series of sharp, mechanical interactions that feel alien to the fluid rhythm of the waves. Then the voices begin. They are the voices of the men from the shore, rough and hearty, their vowels carrying the weight of the mainland, the salt of the docks, and the mundane concerns of a world that feels increasingly fictional to the man on the rock. They speak of the price of grain, the news of a local marriage, and the biting cold of the winter harbor, their words tumbling over one another in a frantic, busy stream. The keeper listens, and he responds with a voice that feels rusty and deep in his own chest, a sound he has not used for anything but the occasional humming of a tune to the wind. He finds that while he understands their language, the context of their lives has become thin and translucent. He helps them haul the crates of oil, the sacks of coal, and the barrels of salted meat up to the base of the tower, their shared labor creating a brief, rhythmic connection of muscle and breath. There is a momentary warmth in the exchange, a flash of human recognition in the eyes of the sailors as they look at the man who occupies this pillar of stone. But there is also a palpable distance. To them, he is a figure of mystery, a solitary ghost inhabitant of a vertical world. To him, they are travelers from a busy, frantic dream that he has long since woken from. The interaction is efficient and brief, born of a mutual respect for the rising tide and the darkening sky. The sailors do not linger, for the rock is an inhospitable host to those who do not belong to it. And soon the lines are cast off and the boat begins its retreat toward the distant, hazy line of the coast. The keeper stands on the landing, his hands resting on the cold iron of the crane, and watches as the boat shrinks into a speck of dark wood against the vast, heaving grey of the Atlantic. The voices fade first, the wind snatching the last fragments of their laughter and their calls, and then the mechanical sounds of the oars and the rigging are swallowed by the immense, liquid sigh of the sea. The silence does not return as a sudden vacuum. Instead, it flows back into the space left by the men like water rushing into a depression in the sand. It is a thick, velvet silence that wraps itself around the tower and the man, a familiar and comforting blanket that restores the natural order of things. He realizes, with a sense of quiet and profound relief, that the solitude no longer feels heavy or burdensome. It does not feel like an absence. It feels like a fullness, a saturated state of being where every thought and every sensation has the room to expand to its natural limit. He turns back to the heavy iron door of the tower, and as it groans shut behind him, the sound is like a period at the end of a long, busy sentence. He is alone again, but the word alone has lost its edge of sorrow. It has become a synonym for clarity, for a life lived without the static of unnecessary interference. He begins the climb back up the spiral, each step taking him further away from the momentary intrusion of the world and closer to the steady, burning heart of his purpose. The supplies he has gathered are laid out in the lower rooms, the scent of fresh hemp rope and new timber mixing with the established aroma of stone and oil. He spends the remainder of the afternoon organizing these provisions with a slow and appreciative focus, touching the burlap of the sacks and the smooth wood of the crates. These objects are his lifelines, yet they do not possess the power to move him as much as the shifting light on the wall or the change in the pitch of the wind. He is grateful for the coal and the flour, but he is more grateful for the return of the quiet. He realizes that his brief encounter with the sailors has served as a benchmark, a way of measuring how far he has traveled into the interior of his own soul. He found that he had nothing to ask them, no hunger for news from the town, no longing for the warmth of a crowded tavern. The life he has built within the circular walls of the lighthouse is sufficient. It is more than sufficient. It is a complete and self-contained universe. He finds a strange and beautiful satisfaction in the fact that he is the only one who knows the specific way. The shadows pull in the stairwell at 4 in the afternoon, or the exact vibration the tower makes when a particularly large swell strikes the north face. These are the intimacies of his life, a private and sacred knowledge shared only with the stone and the sea. As the sun begins its long, shallow dive toward the western horizon, he prepares for the evening watch with a sense of renewed and heightened peace. The air in the lantern room is cold, but he moves through it with a warmth in his blood, his body singing with the familiarity of the routine. He cleans the glass with a slow, circular motion, the chamois cloth squeaking softly against the pane, and he notices how the light of the setting sun catches the tiny imperfections in the glass, turning them into miniature, glowing galaxies. The horizon is a hard, dark line, and the sky above it is a pale, translucent lemon that fades into a deep, chilling violet. He feels a sense of profound readiness. The arrival of the boat was a reminder of the world's motion, but the tower is a reminder of the world's stillness. He is the guardian of that stillness. He is the one who remains awake so that others may sleep, the one who watches the dark so that others may find their way. This is the core of his peace, the understanding that his isolation is not a withdrawal from the world, but a specialized form of engagement with it. He serves the sailors he just spoke with by remaining here, long after they have returned to their hearths and their families. He is the constant in their shifting lives, the fixed point that allows them to navigate the chaos of the deep. He strikes the match, and the soft orange flare is reflected a dozen times in the polished brass of the reflectors. The wick catches, and the flame grows, steady and strong, fed by the high-quality oil he just hauled from the landing. He watches as the great lens begins its stately, silent rotation, the beam of light cutting through the twilight like a physical object, a solid bar of gold that pushes back the shadows. The rhythm of the light is the rhythm of his own mind, a calm and unfailing cadence that marks the passage of a night he no longer fears. He takes his seat on the high stool, his eyes following the sweep of the beam as it illuminates the churning white of the surf and the dark, restless humps of the waves. The silence of the tower is absolute now, a living presence that seems to breathe with him. He thinks of the sailors back in their harbor, and he wishes them well, but he does not wish to be among them. He belongs here, at the edge of the world, where the land ends and the infinite begins. The isolation has stripped away the layers of his old self, the vanities and the leaving behind something as durable and honest as the granite dot. The night deepens, and the stars appear in their thousands, cold and brilliant in the winter air. The Milky Way is a luminous, tattered ribbon stretched across the zenith, and he feels a sense of kinship with the distant stars. They too are solitary watchers in the dark, their light traveling across immense distances to reach an eye that might be looking upward. He is a part of that same celestial geometry, a point of light in a vast and shadowed expanse. He finds himself reflecting on the nature of time, how it has transformed from a series of demands into a long, unfolding grace. On the mainland, time was a thief, always stealing away the moments before they could be fully tasted. Here, time is a gift, a wide and open field in which he can simply be. He listens to the ocean, which has a different voice to Nitalo, rhythmic booming that sounds like the heartbeat of the earth itself. It is a sound that brings a deep ancestral comfort, a reminder that he is a part of a world that is ancient and enduring. The tower vibrates with the power of the water, a subtle tremor that he feels in the marrow of his bones, and he leans into the stone. A man and his house standing firm against the pulse of the deep. He realizes that the peace he feels is not a static thing, but a dynamic and active state of being. It is the peace of the hawk riding the thermal, the peace of the wave as it gathers its strength. It is a peace born of purpose and alignment. He is in the right place, doing the right work, at the right time. The silence is the medium through which this realization flows. He thinks about the days to come, the long winter ahead with its gales and its snows, and he feels a sense of quiet anticipation. The light of the seasons begins to blur into a single, vast movement of time, a tapestry woven from identical threads of salt, oil, and the rhythmic sigh of the Atlantic. The years do not pass here with the jarring interruptions of the mainland. They do not announce themselves with the ringing of church bells or the changing fashions of the street. Instead, the passage of time is felt in the slow, inevitable deepening of the grooves in the stone stairs, where his boots have found the same purchase 10,000 times. It is felt in the way the brass of the lantern has thinned ever so slightly from a decade of daily polishing, becoming a skin of gold that seems to hold the memory of every sunset it has reflected. The keeper finds that his routine has long since transcended the need for conscious thought, migrating from the front of his mind into the very marrow of his bones. He no longer decides to climb the spiral. His body simply performs the ascent, his muscles remembering the exact pitch and height of every granite step. He no longer calculates the amount of oil needed for a winter watch. His hand knows the weight of the cans and the depth of the reservoir by the subtle resistance of the flow. He has become a part of the tower's mechanical soul, a living gear in a clockwork of stone and glass that measures its life in the endurance of a flame. This shift from effort to instinct brings with it a profound and quiet grace, a way of being where the self is no longer a separate entity from the task, but a fluid extension of the light itself in this slow accumulation of years. The memories of his former life on the shore have begun to undergo a softening, a gentle erosion like that of a pebble smoothed by the constant motion of the tide. The sharp edges of old names, the specific faces of people he once knew, and the frantic colors of the town have faded into a soft, monochromatic mist. He remembers the smell of wood smoke in a village autumn, but it feels like a story he read in a book rather than a life he once inhabited. This thinning of the past is not a loss, but a shedding of unnecessary weight, a purification of the spirit that allows him to exist entirely within the present moment. He finds that he no longer narrates his life to himself in words. His internal world is composed of sensory echoes, the specific blue of a pre-dawn horizon, the vibration of the tower during a spring gale, the cold purity of the cistern water. He is a man whose identity has been redrawn by the elements, his character defined not by what he possesses or whom he knows, but by the steady, unwavering focus of his gaze. The silence of the lighthouse has become his primary language, a rich and textured medium in which he finds more meaning than he ever did in the clamor of conversation. He has learned that silence is not empty. It is a vessel for the immense and subtle music of the world, a music he hears in the ticking of the cooling lantern and the distant, choral moan of the deep sea as he ages within the circular walls. The changes in his own body are as gradual and natural as the weathering of the lighthouse exterior. His hair has become the color of the sea foam that coats the lower rocks after a storm, a pale and translucent silver. His skin is etched with fine lines that map the decades of squinting into the glare of the sun and the spray of the salt. A geography of service written upon his face. He moves with a slower, more deliberate pace, not out of a sense of weariness, but out of a deep-seated economy of motion. Every gesture is purposeful. Every step is placed with a quiet certainty. He finds a strange and beautiful symmetry in the way his own aging mirrors the steady, patient endurance of the tower. They are both being shaped by the same forces, both standing firm against the same winds, both serving the same singular purpose. He feels no regret for the passing of his youth, for he has traded the turbulent energy of his earlier years for a clarity and a peace that are as deep as the ocean floor. He is a man at the end of a long and meaningful journey, a man who has found that the destination was not a place on a map, but a state of being. The ships that pass in the distance are fewer now, or perhaps they have simply become more ghost-like to his seasoned eyes. He watches their flickering lights at night with a gentle, detached affection, acknowledging their passage through his domain without the need to be part of their world. He is the point of constancy they rely upon, the fixed star in their moving universe, and he is content in that distant and vital role. He thinks sometimes of the men who will eventually take his place, imagining their footsteps on these same stairs and their hands on this same brass. He feels a sense of continuity with them, a link in a chain of watchers that stretches both backward and forward through time. He is a steward of a legacy, a guardian of a flame that began long before he arrived and will continue long after he departs. This awareness of his place in the lineage of the light provides him with a sense of immortality that is quiet and unpretentious. He does not need his name to be remembered. He only needs the light to remain. The seasons continue their grand, circular dance, each one bringing its own familiar texture to the rock. The winters are longer now, or perhaps the cold simply lingers a bit more in his joints. But he welcomes the chill for the focus it demands. The summers are brief and brilliant, a flash of sapphire and gold that provides a respite for the stone. He has seen the ice form on the gallery 1,000 times, and he has seen the heat shimmer over the waves just as often. This repetition has not bred boredom, but a profound and intimate knowledge of the Earth's respiration. He knows exactly which day the first gannets will return to the cliffs, and he can smell the arrival of a storm hours before the first clouds appear. He is a scholar of the horizon, a man who has read the book of the sea until he knows its every page by heart. His life is a long, slow meditation on the nature of constancy, a testament to the power of a single, focused intent. There is a deep and abiding comfort in the predictability of his days. He wakes at the same hour, his body attuned to the shifting light of the dawn. He prepares his simple meals with a grace that has been refined by years of repetition. He cleans the glass, trims the wicks, and hauls the oil with a quiet and steady industry. These tasks are his prayers, his way of honoring the life he has been given and the tower that sustains him. He finds that he is never lonely, for the sea and the wind are his constant companions, and his own soul is a vast and interesting territory to explore. He has found that the deeper one goes into the silence, the more one finds to listen to. He has discovered the secret conversations of the tides and the silent thoughts of the stars. He is a man who has stepped out of the stream of history and into the ocean of eternity. As the sun begins to set on another day of his long tenure, he stands on the gallery and watches the transition with a gaze that is both ancient and fresh. The sky is a vast watercolor wash of peach, violet, and pale gold, the colors blending into one another with a seamless and breathtaking beauty. The ocean is a mirror for the sky, the waves moving with a heavy rhythmic pulse that seems to synchronize with his own breathing. He feels a sense of profound and absolute settlement. He is exactly where he is meant to be, doing exactly what he is meant to do. The tower around him is a warm and familiar embrace, its stones holding the memory of a lifetime of light. He thinks of the mainland, and it feels like a dream he once had in another century, a place of noise and motion that has no hold on him. He belongs to the edge, to the boundary, to the place where the world ends and the light begins. He begins the ascent for the evening watch, his hand resting lightly on the curved wall. The stone is cool and smooth, worn by the passage of time and the touch of his own palm. He enters the lantern room, where the air is bright with the last of the day's radiance. He moves to the lamp, his movements instinctive and sure, a ritual that has become as natural as breathing. The flame takes hold with a soft, confident glow, and the light begins its slow, stately rotation. It is a beautiful and familiar sight, the golden beam cutting through the gathering dark, a sign of hope and safety for a world he can no longer see. He takes his seat on the high stool, his eyes following the sweep of the light across the obsidian water. The stars begin to appear, one by one, cold and brilliant in the deepening navy of the sky. He is at peace. The night is long, the sea is vast, and the tower is a point of absolute certainty in the dark. He is the keeper, the steady and unwavering soul of the light, and he is content to watch the world turn from his high and lonely sanctuary. A man who has found his home in the silence and his purpose in the stars. The rhythm of the rotating light casts a rhythmic shadow against the interior wall, a dark bar that sweeps past him every few seconds, marking the steady heartbeat of the night. He watches it with a calm and distant fascination, seeing in its movement the entire history of his time on the rock. Every sweep is a second, every rotation a minute, every watch a lifetime. He feels a sense of immense gratitude for the simplicity of his existence. He has been spared the complications of the world, the tangles of ambition and the burdens of possession. He owns nothing but his memories and his skills, yet he feels richer than any man he ever knew on the shore. The light remains the one unchanging constant in a world that has otherwise transformed into a tapestry of blurred seasons and fading echoes. As the keeper enters the twilight of his own years, his perspective has shifted from the immediate mechanics of the tower to a wider, more ethereal understanding of the legacy he upholds. He has become acutely aware of the thousands of lives that have been tethered to his steady hand. Sailors whose names he will never know, whose faces are hidden behind the veil of the horizon, and whose safety has depended entirely on the brilliance of a single, polished lens. He thinks of them not as strangers, but as distant companions in the great, dark mystery of the sea. Each rotation of the beam is a silent conversation, a message sent across the miles to say that someone is awake. Someone is watching, and someone has held the line against the encroaching chaos of the waves. This realization does not bring a sense of self-importance, but rather a profound and humbling weight of continuity. He is merely a link in a chain that began long before his birth and will extend far beyond his final breath. He sees himself now as a temporary inhabitant of a permanent truth, a steward of a flame that belongs to the sea itself. The lighthouse has seen men come and go, their boots wearing down the stone and their hands polishing the brass until they, too, are weathered away by the salt, yet the light persists. He finds a deep, settling peace in this impermanence, an acceptance that his own life is a brief and beautiful spark within the vast, enduring shadow of the tower. His movements through the circular rooms are now so deeply ingrained that they feel like a form of prayer, a ritual of motion that honors the passage of time without resisting it. He notices how the light of the late afternoon sun catches the fine silver of his beard and the deep, weathered valleys of his palms, and he sees in them the same honest wear that he finds on the iron railings of the gallery. He is being reclaimed by the elements, slowly and gently, as the salt air works its way into the marrow of his bones. This does not feel like an ending, but like a completion, a folding of the self back into the landscape he has served for so long. He spends his days in a state of quiet reflection, watching the way the ocean's color shifts from the pale, milky green of a calm morning to the deep, resonant indigo of a coming storm. He has learned to love the sea not just for its beauty, but for its indifference. It is a force that demands nothing but respect and offers nothing but the truth. In its presence, the small vanities of the human heart are washed away. leaving only the essential core of a man who has found his purpose in the silence. He thinks of the mainland occasionally, but the memories are like old, dried flowers pressed between the pages of a book, delicate, distant, and stripped of their original scent. The only reality that matters is the one contained within the curve of the whitewashed walls and the infinite reach of the horizon. The silence of the tower has evolved into a rich, symphonic presence that he can navigate with his eyes closed. He can tell the depth of the tide by the specific resonance of the hollow boom beneath the rock, and he can gauge the temperature of the air by the way the brass fittings feel against his fingertips. There is a profound intimacy in this knowledge, a sense of being entirely woven into the fabric of the place. He finds that he no longer feels the need to leave a mark on the world. The light is mark enough. The legacy of the keeper is written in the lives of the ships that reached their ports and the families who were reunited because a beacon remained lit on a lonely rock. He is a ghost of service, a silent guardian whose greatest achievement is his invisibility. As he prepares the lamp for the night, he moves with a reverence that has only deepened with the decades. The oil is poured with a steady hand, the wick trimmed with surgical precision, and the glass cleaned until it is a transparent boundary between the man and the infinite. He is preparing for another watch, another vigil in a sequence that has spanned a lifetime, and he does so with the same freshness of spirit that he felt on his very first night. The evening light begins to withdraw from the lantern room, leaving a soft, blue gloom that is soon pierced by the golden birth of the flame. He watches the reflection of the light in his own eyes, seeing the flicker of a fire that has burned for 40 years. He thinks of the keepers who will follow him, young men perhaps full of the same trepidation he once felt, and he wishes he could tell them that the solitude is not a desert, but a garden. He wishes he could tell them that the silence will eventually become the most beautiful song they have ever heard. But he knows that these are lessons that must be earned through the slow accumulation of hours and the patient enduring of the seasons. He is content to leave the tower exactly as he found it, clean, sturdy, and ready for the next soul to find its rhythm within the stone. The impermanence of his own presence is what gives the lighthouse its dignity. It is a monument to a collective will, a testament to the human desire to protect and to guide. He is proud to have been a part of it, to have given his years to the maintenance of a single, unwavering point of hope. The first few stars of the night appear in the darkening vault, appearing like pinpricks in a vast, dark curtain. He settles onto his stool, the rhythmic sweep of the beam casting a long, golden shadow that dances across the walls. The world below has vanished into the dark, leaving only the white line of the surf and the rhythmic moaning of the deep. He feels a sense of immense, quiet gratitude for the life he has lived. He has been a witness to the grandest shows of nature, the aurora dancing over the northern waves, the whales breaching in the moonlight, and the fierce, magnificent beauty of a winter gale. He has found a peace that the world of the shore can never offer, a peace born of isolation and the clarity of the edge. The night air is cold and sharp, but he does not feel the chill. He is warmed by the steady burn of the lamp and the comfort of the routine. He is exactly where he belongs, a sentinel at the edge of the world, watching the stars and the sea with a gaze that is as old as the rock and as clear as the glass. As the hours of the watch unfold, he finds himself thinking of the lighthouse as a living entity, a great heart pumping light into the darkness. He is the pulse, the driving force that keeps the rhythm steady. He feels a deep kinship with the machinery, the gears and weights that have been his only constant companions. They have never failed him, and he has never failed them. Together, they have held the night at bay, creating a small circle of certainty in a world of motion. He knows that his time in the tower is drawing toward its natural conclusion, but he feels no fear or sorrow. He sees it as the final rotation of a long and beautiful watch. The transition back to the earth will be as gentle as the transition from day to night. He has lived a life of light, and he is ready for the rest that comes with the dawn. The legacy of the keeper is not in the stone or the brass, but in the light itself, light that will continue to turn long after he is gone, guided by other hands and watched by other eyes. The middle of the night brings a profound stillness, a moment when the wind drops and the sea seems to hold its breath. He sits in the lantern room, the only living thing for miles, and he feels the weight of the universe pressing gently against the glass. It is a moment of pure, unadulterated existence, a state of being where the self dissolves into the light and the light dissolves into the dark. He is at peace with the silence, at peace with the sea, and at peace with his own journey. He has kept the watch, he has held the flame, and he has served the unseen world with a faithful heart. The night moves on, slow and majestic, as the stars wheel overhead in their ancient patterns. The lighthouse stands firm, a white pillar of constancy against the infinite, and the keeper breathes in time with the Atlantic, a solitary soul who has found his true frequency in the heart of the stone. The dawn will come, as it always does, bringing a new day and a new set of tasks. But for now, there is only the watch. There is only the steady, golden beam cutting through the night, a silent promise kept in the heart of the darkness. He watches the light sweep across the obsidian waves, again and again, a silver path appearing and disappearing on the water, and he knows that the cycle is perfect. He is a part of the history of the light, a chapter in a story that will never end as long as men go down to the sea in ships. He leans his head back against the cool masonry, closing his eyes for a moment to listen to the song of the tower. It is a song of endurance, of purpose, and of the quiet beauty of a life lived for others. He is the keeper, and he is at home. The evening has settled into a deep and magnificent night, and the tower is a sanctuary of fire and stone, standing tall against the changing tides of time. He remains at his post, a quiet man in a white tower, watching the world turn from his high and lonely sanctuary, perfectly still and perfectly at peace as the light continues its patient, circular journey toward the morning. The silence of the night is his greatest reward, a presence that fills the room with a sense of sacredness. He reflects on how the isolation has not narrowed his life, but expanded it. He has become a part of the elements, his thoughts as wide as the ocean and his spirit as high as the stars. He no longer feels the need for the distractions of the shore. The play of light on the water is a drama more compelling than any theatre. The transition of the hours brings with it a softness that feels almost like a prayer, a slow and intentional thinning of the air that suggests the world is not ending, but merely changing its form once more. The keeper finds himself standing on the gallery in the mid-afternoon light, his hands resting on the iron railing with a lightness he has never known before. He looks out at the Atlantic, which today is a vast and shimmering tapestry of silver and pale opal, the waves moving with a lazy, ancient rhythm that seems to acknowledge the passage of 1,000 lifetimes without ever losing its own pulse. He realizes that the sea does not remember the names of the ships it has carried, nor does the rock remember the names of the men who have stood upon it, yet both are deeply marked by the interaction. There is a profound comfort in this anonymity, a sense that he is being absorbed into a much larger and more enduring narrative of stone and salt. He no longer feels the need to leave a mark or a memory. He is content to be a momentary ripple in the great, unfolding continuity of the coast. The lighthouse itself seems to breathe with him. Its masonry cooled by the winter air, but its heart still warm with the latent heat of the lamp and the steady, quiet life that has unfolded within its circular rooms for so many decades. He thinks of the light not as something he creates, but as something he merely facilitates, a celestial truth that he has been privileged to host for a brief and beautiful interval. His movements through the tower have become so subtle and refined that he seems to glide across the stone, a ghost of a man whose presence is felt more in the silence he leaves behind than in the sound of his footsteps. He spends a long time in the living quarters, looking at the small, familiar objects that have defined his existence: the heavy iron kettle, the worn wooden chair, the logbook with its thousands of entries recorded in a hand that grew steadier and simpler as the years went by. These things are the artifacts of a life lived in service to the horizon, and he views them with a gentle, detached affection. He understands that they will remain here long after his own watch is ended, waiting for the next set of hands to give them meaning. This continuity is the true soul of the lighthouse. It is a relay of watchfulness, a long and unbroken chain of human intent stretching across the centuries. He feels a sense of deep and resonant rest, a stillness that has migrated from the center of the rock into the center of his own being. He is no longer waiting for the next tide or the next storm. He is simply existing in the perfect, unhurried present. The ocean continues its rhythmic moaning against the base of the tower, a sound that has become the foundational frequency of his soul. A lullaby that speaks of beginning and end in the same breath. The afternoon sun begins to sink lower, casting a long, slender shadow of the tower across the restless water, a dark needle pointing toward the infinite east. He watches the colors of the sky shift from a pale, translucent gold to a deep atmospheric violet, and he feels the familiar call of the lamp. He makes the ascent one more time, his body moving with a fluid, instinctive grace that requires no effort. The spiral stairs are a familiar path home, each step a well-loved friend in the cooling shadows. He enters the lantern room, and the air is bright and still, expectant with the coming of the night. He prepares the oil and the wick with a reverence that has become absolute, his hands moving with the precision of a master craftsman who has long ago mastered his medium. There is no hurry, no urgency, only the slow and beautiful fulfillment of a duty that has become his very identity. He strikes the match, and the soft amber flare is reflected in the great glass lenses, creating a kaleidoscope of warm light that fills the room. The flame takes hold, steady and strong, and as the clockwork mechanism begins its slow, hypnotic rotation, the beam reaches out across the dark to touch the water once more. It is a magnificent and simple sight, a golden promise kept in the heart of the great, shimmering void. He sits in his accustomed place, the high stool worn smooth by his own form, and watches the beam sweep across the obsidian waves. He thinks of the ships that are out there now, their masts dipping into the swells, their crews looking toward this very point of light as a sign of constancy in a moving world. He feels a sense of quiet kinship with them, a wordless bond that transcends the miles and the darkness. He is the guardian of their safety, the silent watcher who ensures that the path remains clear. Yet he also knows that the lighthouse is more than just a navigational aid. It is a symbol of the endurance of the spirit, a white pillar of resolve standing against the vast and indifferent deep. He feels a profound sense of satisfaction in knowing that he has played his part. that he has held the light through the gales and the calms, through the snows and the suns. His life has been a long and steady watch, and he is ready for the quiet rest that the night promises. The silence of the tower is thick and sweet, a velvet presence that wraps around him and the light, creating a sanctuary of peace in the heart of the Atlantic. The hours pass in a seamless flow of light and shadow, the stars wheeling overhead in their ancient, immutable patterns. He watches the Milky Way arch over the lantern, a luminous bridge of stardust that seems to connect the tower to the very center of the universe. He feels small, but he does not feel insignificant. He is a necessary component of the grand design, a point of light reflecting the greater light above. He realizes that the lighthouse will continue to stand long after he has returned to the earth, its beam continuing to turn, its stone continuing to hold. New men will come, new voices will echo in the stairwell, and new hands will polish the brass, but the essence of the watch will remain unchanged. It is an eternal rhythm, as certain and as beautiful as the tides. He finds a deep, settling peace in this continuity, a sense that his own life has been a small but vital contribution to a story that will never truly end. The ocean continues its long, slow respiration, the white foam flickering like ghosts in the starlight, and the keeper leans back against the cool masonry, his breath in perfect synchronization with the deep dot as the middle of the night approaches. A profound and absolute stillness settles over the rock. The wind has dropped to a mere whisper, and the sea has become a field of polished black glass, reflecting the stars with a clarity that makes the tower feel as if it is suspended in the heavens. He sits in the warm amber glow of the lantern, a man who has found his center, a man who has found his peace. He is no longer a keeper of the light. He is a part of the light itself. His thoughts are as clear and as expansive as the horizon, free from the entanglements of the shore and the anxieties of time. He is at home in the magnificent, shimmering dark. He knows that the dawn will come, and the sun will take over the watch, and the day will bring its simple tasks and its quiet reflections. But for now, there is only the night, and the light, and the sea. There is only the steady, golden beam cutting through the dark, a silent promise kept in the heart of the infinite. He watches it sweep past, again and again, a silver path appearing and disappearing on the water, and he feels a sense of profound and total contentment. The lighthouse stands firm, its whitewashed stone a stark and beautiful contrast to the deep navy of the sky. It is a monument to the quiet power of constancy, a testament to the beauty of a life lived in harmony with the natural world. The keeper remains at his post, a silent sentinel in a world of motion, his eyes fixed on the horizon with a gaze that is both ancient and fresh. He is a part of the rock, a part of the sea, and a part of the stars. He has found his place in the great, unfolding mystery of the world, and he is at rest. The night is long, but it is not lonely. It is full of the presence of the deep and the presence of the soul, finally and completely at peace. The light continues its patient, circular journey, a golden thread pulling the darkness into order, a silent promise that will endure as long as the stone holds and the water moves. He leans his head back, closing his eyes for a moment to listen to the song of the tower, a song of endurance and of rest, a song that has no end. The rhythm of the ocean becomes a steady, liquid pulse that carries him toward the threshold of sleep, a slow and heavy movement that feels like the rocking of a boat in a sheltered harbor. He does not fight the fatigue. He welcomes it as a natural extension of the watch. He knows that even if he closes his eyes, the light will continue to turn, the clockwork will continue to tick, and the world will continue to be guarded by the stone. He is a man who has done his work, a man who has kept his promise, and he is ready for the stillness. The amber glow of the lantern room is a warm and protective embrace, a circle of safety in the vast and indifferent dark. He breathes deeply of the salt-heavy air, feeling the weight of the years as a comfortable and familiar blessing. He is the keeper, and the keeper is at rest. The night moves on, slow and majestic, and the lighthouse remains a point of absolute certainty in the dark. A white pillar of hope standing tall against the changing tides of time. As the first faint, ghostly grey of the pre-dawn begins to colour the eastern sky, the world remains in a state of perfect and beautiful suspension. The stars are beginning to fade, and the ocean is becoming visible once more as a vast, restless expanse of leaden grey.